Hello and welcome to episode number 2 of Meet the Society for Manchester and District Referee Society. I'm Henry Pearson again, a Manchester referee, and today I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Stephen Snoddy. I joined the society in 2007, and I played the game at a reasonably high standard. I joined my hometown club, Lisburn, after leaving French School Lisburn, where I was the first 15 captain. And then I played for Ulster Juniors. Ulster Juniors was basically the team of all the clubs that were beneath the Premiership. And then I played for Ulster Juniors, and then North Football Club in the Premier League. They asked me to join, and I played for them for 3.5 seasons before moving to Manchester in 1986 to do a postgraduate at the university. I played half a season at Broughton Park, and then I stopped playing rugby at the age of 28. And then it took a while for me to get back into rugby, and I got back into rugby really when my eldest son Jack, who some of you will have refereed when he played for Altrincham Kersal, when he went to Altrincham Grammar School and started to play rugby at the age of 11. And that's when I got my interest back really into rugby.
Yeah, that sounds good. I think most people potentially who are watching would have seen that you recently at the back end of last year passed over the 1,000 game mark, which is just, I mean, obviously I'm still relatively new to refereeing, and that seems miles away from me. I think a couple of questions that go into that, if that's all right. I'd love to know sort of what you think about making it to 1,000. Like that is such an amazing achievement. All the boys, girls, gents that you would have been able to facilitate a game for because of the amount of times you've taken up the whistle. What is your sort of immediate feelings of that? And is there a standout game that you could probably say was, can you say it's your favorite in the 1,000? Is there anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, there's a couple of games. Well, there's more than a couple, but I'll just dwell on a couple. In 2010, I went to South Africa on exchange for the society, and we were based in Durban. And I went with Andy Rawson, who at the time I think was on the edge of getting on the national panel. I think when he came back from South Africa, he then got on the national panel, and we left Manchester. Actually, it was easy to remember on St. Patrick's Day, 17th of March. We arrived a day later, and then a day after that, I refereed Durban Harlequins v Crusaders at under 20 level on a Friday night, 30 degrees heat, with about 500 people watching the game. And after about 20 minutes, I was absolutely shattered. Probably a bit of weary legs from the journey, but the South African under 20s were just like miniature versions of the box. They didn't actually even seem to be miniature. They were huge. They ran and ran and ran. And I have to admit, after 20 minutes, and obviously I was being assessed and stuff. So I looked it up this morning, and the score was actually 48-22, and it just ran and ran and ran. And the most satisfying thing about it was I think I contributed to a great game of rugby. And then afterwards, this huge bloke, he must have been 6'5", came walking over in the bar and shook my hand and said, "You can come back anytime." And then I inquired who it was, and I wish I could remember his name. I can't, but he was an ex-Springbok. So I thought, what a fantastic game in South Africa on a Friday night in front of 500 people. So that is a memorable game. And then another game that's closer to home. I was on Liverpool Exchange, and it was New Brighton v Winnington Park. It was New Brighton 39, Winnington Park 40. And it was one of those games where the lead changed, 6, 7, 8 times, and it was nip and tuck all the way. But my problem was that obviously there's supposed to be an assessor, and the assessor didn't turn up. It's one of those games you think, well, afterwards, you think, Oh, I wish the assessor turned up. But about 5 minutes before kickoff, there was a knock on the door, and Ian Tempest, who's now a Premiership referee, and I had come across him because he had refereed a final that my son had played in at Colts level. So he was probably about early 20s at the time. And he introduced himself and he asked me who my assessor was. And I said, well, the assessor hasn't turned up. So he said that he would assess me. So it was great because he was fantastic after the match. He gave me some very, very encouraging words. Great game. And I walked away thinking, wow, well, that was great. So those are two games out of the thousands that,
Mm.
have a sort of special memory for me. Two totally different contexts. But actually the two games themselves were, fast running, plenty of tries, and you felt that you had contributed to a great game of rugby.
Yeah, that's great to hear. I think it's probably really nice that they were different for very different reasons. One was obviously the aspect of being in South Africa, all the things that came with it, the players that were probably on show, and then one was obviously the not only was it close to home, but also around that, didn't expect a Premiership referee to be able to go and watch. So no, that's really good. I think one thing that's evident in even what you've just said is you are absolutely detail on sort of your remembering every event. I think for those that don't know, Stephen after he reached his 1,000 games, did a section in one of our Mad Ref Society meetings where we had a quiz. And essentially we went through like, oh, how many yellow cards in 1,000 games, how many penalties, what's the average try scores? And I think blown us away in terms of like I can't remember what like scores were from games I don't know, at the end of last season. Obviously, you've got like this big database of all the games that you've ever refed and the results and who scored and how many yellow cards. And I think that's just sort of testament to the dedication you've showed over the 1,000 games. I think leading on from that, I think you can't get to such a great number, and obviously you're carrying on refereeing and you're not giving up after that. You've carried on and hopefully you might get to 1,500. Is there anything that you'd say is sort of the main reason why you're refereeing? What's your love of refereeing? Is there a particular reason?
Yeah, I want because I love the game so much, and I one of my regrets is I think stopping at 28. But just to put that into context, when I finished my postgraduate at Manchester University, I moved to Bristol, and my girlfriend Sandra, who's now my wife, she'd moved over from Belfast, and it was a very difficult for people from Northern Ireland to acclimatize is the wrong word, or to try and fit into England. So I didn't feel that when we moved to Bristol. I mean, I literally finished my exams on a Friday, and started a new job in Bristol on the Monday. So I didn't feel as if I could go away 2 nights a week training and then Saturdays, you know, every other Saturday you'd be playing away. Um, and I just I remember what made me become a referee, and I really shouldn't admit this, but I'm going to because I think it's a very useful um, metaphor in a way. In that I was watching my son Jack play at Altrincham Grammar School, and they were playing a school away from home, and the PE teacher was refereeing the game, and he was obviously not a rugby coach or knew anything about rugby because there were no offside lines in the game. Let's just say that politely. Let
Could have been me
the
refereeing it. You
the
don't know.
others the other school. I mean, they weren't even they weren't 10 yards back at lineouts,
Hmm.
and I perhaps embarrassed to say that I let him know that he didn't know what he was doing. And then the following week, I got a letter from the head teacher of Altrincham Grammar School saying that I shouldn't be shouting from the touchline. So I wrote a very effusive apology back. But the head of PE at the time, a guy called John, he said, well, Stephen, we're doing a referees course for PE teachers in a couple of weeks. Do you want to join that course? And I said, yeah, of course. Yeah, I'll do it. Yeah. So that's really what started it. And then I'm trying to, I think the reason why I started keeping a record of my games was that most of you will know that my older brother Alan was a World Cup footballer, and he kept a record. And I remember chatting to him and telling him I was, starting to be a referee and stuff. And he said to me, keep a record because it's just really interesting to have. And that's why I started. And then once I started, you kept going on. And then my goal really to begin with when I was refereeing was to get to level 6 because I only started when I was 47. And obviously, I got to know the way of the society. I got to know about the levels. I got to know that level 5 was the point where young developing referees were tested at level 5, and then they would move to, if they were good enough, move on to the national panel and so on. So I knew that I wasn't going to get to level 5, and I completely understood that from the start. So my goal was to get to level 6, which I achieved. And then I refereed, suppose, for 4 or 5 seasons at level 6, and I still do the odd level 6 game, which is terrific. Um, and it was only during COVID really did I start to collate all the stats that I had. I mean, I had them year by year, and then I realized I was getting close to 1,000, and then I thought, right, that's my next goal. Um, and I reached that goal, and as you know, I kept all these statistics, which I've actually found really, really interesting. And I think as the laws of the game change, I mean, I think you'll probably find, certainly at the elite level, more red cards given out than what there was 10 years ago, particularly with the high tackles. Certainly penalty tries have shot up in the last 3 or 4 or 5 seasons because referees, even at the community level, are more comfortable giving penalty tries and a yellow card than they would have before because it's become, I wouldn't say it's the norm, but it's become easier to give a penalty try, particularly if there's a maul that's moving very close to the line and suddenly it goes down. So, so in terms of my ambitions were always to try and make every game that I did better. And actually, really importantly, is to try and enjoy it. And there's not that many games. Obviously, every referee has a game where they wish they hadn't ref or they didn't ref it particularly well, which then didn't help in the outcome. But I can genuinely say, in 1,000 games, it's probably 10 games I really wished that I hadn't been that ref or I hadn't controlled something well enough or something had escalated that I shouldn't have let escalate. It's and really what I try and do is enjoy it as much as possible.
Yeah, no, that sounds really good. And obviously, we've seen and spoken at society meetings about sort of contributing to that game, and that's what we try and do with all of our referees, don't we? In the society, we try and say, it's almost not about us; it's about sort of facilitating a game for the players. And if we feel like we've not, been the centre of attention in those games, we feel like we've done a good job. I think just like to pick up on something you touched on. So obviously you spoke about that transition from, an Irish born lad moving over, doing his postgrad, getting a job in Bristol. I'd be really interested to know about, do you see any key differences between the Irish game at community level versus the English game, for those that probably haven't experienced a touring side coming over or refereeing in Ireland?
Well, just over a year ago, I joined the Ulster Referees Society, and that means that because my wife Sana and I are going back to Northern Ireland to see friends and relatives more often than we did, and I realised that I could referee games when I'm back in Northern Ireland, but I had to be a member of the Ulster Referees Society. And thanks to Paul Houston, because there was actually quite a lot of admin involved, and it's to do with insurance. It's to do with making sure that you're covered. By the way, I don't put down my home address as Stockport. I don't claim the mileage.
Yeah, mileage from Stockport to Dublin might be slightly over the
Yeah,
45p limit.
yeah. So I've done 2 games, and in fact I've got a game coming up which I'll tell you about. One of them was an under 17 game, and interestingly, it was like a Colts game, except in Northern Ireland they play them on a Saturday morning, and they're between 2 clubs, Ballyclare and Ballymoney. It was a bit of a local derby actually, and it's for boys who go to school who don't play rugby. So interestingly, in Northern Ireland, it's basically like a Colts game, and that was exactly the type of Colts game you might do here on a Sunday morning. And then I did a third 15 game in February, and again it was in fact I think it was probably a slightly better quality, because I think the difference in Northern Ireland, if I can just speak about it and the Northwest, there's actually not that many clubs now who have third 15s. And the two clubs I refereed was Lisburn and Cook, and those are relatively junior clubs in Northern Ireland, and both of them had third 15s.
Mm.
So I think if there is a difference, I think although Northern Ireland is slightly smaller than Yorkshire, I still think the community aspect of rugby in Northern Ireland is probably stronger than it is in England, because I think there's a lot of clubs struggling. Whereas I think in Northern Ireland you still have a lot of clubs with thirds and even fourths. And when I played for North, one of the best clubs in Ireland, and from memory, I think we had about sixths, going back to six. And in fact, it reminds me that I'm a member of North Football Club. It's not they joined with Collegians about 20 years ago and became Belfast Harlequins. But I'm now a member of Facebook of North as a sort of memories thing. And up popped North third 15 around about late 80s. And I showed it to my son Jack. And in North thirds, there was three or four ex-Ulster players and a couple of ex-Irish internationals.
Mm.
And in those days, even if you'd played at the very, very highest level, you still felt like, 3, 4, 5 years past your prime, or when you're not playing for the first 15, you played for the second 15. And these guys were even playing for the third 15. So North third 15 were absolutely an amazing team. I mean, they were all like over 30, but there was at least half a dozen quality players. And I think that perhaps is the difference between the pre-professional days and what you have now, because you won't have obviously those professional players playing down the levels, because I don't think they're allowed to, are they?
No, yeah, you certainly won't get that from a contracted player, but I think it's really nice to hear about sort of that, some of that community spirit, isn't it? So once they pack it
Yeah.
in, whether that be a full-time role or a part-time role, that they're almost indebted to their club that contribute to their success in the first place. They go back there, they play, they're part, they're busy, they're involved in the day-to-day, and hopefully, inspiring young Irish rugby players of the future, which is great to hear from a rugby perspective, not so good to hear from an England rugby perspective. You spoke about you've got a game coming up. Do you want to touch on that?
Yeah, so I'm going back to Northern Ireland from the 4th to the 11th of September, and on the Saturday the 7th of September, and I realise I'm one of the referees is not available for mad refs, and I think we're short of referees that weekend, aren't we? But my old school, French School Lisburn, was founded in 1774, and it's the 250th birthday of the school on the Saturday the 7th of February. And I looked up the fixtures and I saw that French School Lisburn first 15 were playing Bangor Grammar School. And I contacted the Ulster Referee Society and put in a plea. Could I please do my old school first 15? And I explained why I was back, and I got that game. So I absolutely can't wait to referee on the same pitch, which I captained the first 15 46 years ago. And Bangor Grammar were always a good school as well. I mean, in 1978, when I left school, they won the school's cup.
Mm.
And they had Kenny Hooks on the wing, who went on to play for Ireland, and Kenny Strutt on the other wing. And he was the fastest. Those two were the fastest sprinters at 18 in Northern Ireland. They had one in each wing. So it'll be happy times. I'll have a lump in my throat, I think, because the school is very important to me, because it's from a Quaker heritage, and our family is from a Quaker background. My father went to the school in the 1930s, and he was chair of the board of governors, and all five children, myself, three brothers and sister, all went to the school, and we were all there at one time. So there was a period where five Snoddies were all at the school at the same time. Um, so it'll be a fabulous moment, and I'll also meet up with some of my old school chums.
Mm.
Um, one of whom is Jimmy Kirkwood, who won a gold medal for the GB and Northern Ireland hockey team in the 1988 Olympics.
Mm.
So it'll be fabulous to ref a game on a Saturday morning and then enjoy seeing all my old chums and friends, and I'll meet people who I haven't seen for 40 years.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. I think, yeah, it's obviously great to go back and referee your alumni. I think that community that we've already talked about is probably the main thing, and obviously, a nice advantage, and thanks to Ulster Referee Society for obviously facilitating you getting that game. I think just two questions I'd love to finish on if that's all right, Stephen. And we asked Johnny in episode one the same ones. So first of all, I'd love to know what your favourite club to go to. We'll say the Northwest, so we limit it to this continent. Is there a favourite club that you like to go to?
Um, well, I because the thousands game was Winslow v Warrington, I'll always have a soft spot for Winslow. I've always found them a very, very nice club, very friendly. And even if some of them are slightly vocal on the sidelines, there's never been any problems in, the clubhouse afterwards. And when I did the game, I was lucky because there was a past players lunch on at the same time. So they had the lunch and then 150 odd came out to watch the game. And of course, I'd refereed many of those guys who were having a beer or three beers over lunch. And they presented me, they made a nice little speech and stuff. And I said a few words. And then they gave me a bottle of Black Bushmills whiskey. And it never left the clubhouse, And I left in a taxi at 9:30. And it brought me back to the old days where players did stay at clubs. They bought their opposite number of drink. So Winslow, uh, I'll always have a soft spot for. And I know this, and I know it's like I always love Duckenfield because it's just such a friendly club in the bar afterwards. And this is many, many years ago. It's at least 10 years ago. I was refereeing a game and Duckenfield were getting hammered. And the winger, he never, ever, ever shut up. And I was trying to keep him on the pitch. Believe you me, I was trying. And in the end, I had to red card him. So I went into the clubhouse afterwards, and obviously, when you give a red card, you don't really want to do it, but I had to do it on this occasion for various reasons. And I saw him approach me. I thought, oh no, he's going to say he's still going to say something. And he just put his arm around me and said sorry. And then we had a couple of beers and stuff. So I've always enjoyed the clubhouse in Duckenfield. I think it's a terrific little club. Did they celebrate centenary recently or something?
I think so. I was going to say, I think you'll find that one mad ref, Mr. Morehouse, will be very pleased that you've said Duckinsfield is.
Ah,
But yeah, I think no, listen, that's sort of what rugby's about, isn't it? It's no matter what happens on and off the pitch. It's what no matter what happens off on the pitch. It's that off the pitch camaraderie, and
yeah.
you've made two references there. Obviously, Wilmslow for various reasons, and obviously Duckinsfield for potentially a reason that you might not think about. So yeah, that's a real nice two clubs to mention. And then finally, listen, you're a vastly experienced referee. You're helping with the society. I know that people often come with you for questions on what would you do, etc. Is there anything that you'd give, or a piece of advice you'd give to maybe a YMO that's starting out, or somebody who's thinking about, they might be that parent on the sideline shouting at a referee, altering them grammar. Is there any word of advice you'd give to them about, potentially picking up the whistle and starting?
Um, well, a piece of advice I'd give to all referees. I mean, it's fascinating when you are watching a game and you might be specifically watching the referee. And I find that if you think that the referee is really not enjoying this game, they don't referee it as well as they should. And it's in many ways it's about body language. Is that I think that if you as a referee can build a rapport with players. And it doesn't, obviously, as you go up through the levels, you've got to be super professional, super objective, get your decisions accurate, because, it can cost jobs, it can cost money, et cetera, et cetera. I completely get that. But I do think there's a balance where a referee can have an empathy and a relationship with players in which they then understand that the referee is actually there to help them have a good game. So be approachable, be professional, and actually look as if you're enjoying the game. I find that has helped me through games. And then for why young match officials, um, I actually think they should do what I've done, is to keep a record of their games. And obviously, as you get into the national panel and stuff, I'm sure the RFU keep the records, because that'll be part of assessments. And, do we appoint you to this game or that game, or do we move you into the championship or whatever it is? But I've gained a lot of knowledge and a lot of happy memories from just looking at my match cards. Because when I fill it all in, and it includes all the information that I gave at the society meeting, I'll always write a little comment at the bottom, like it might be something like about the weather, or about the clubhouse afterwards, or about something that happened in the game. I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think of something in particular, but always write something that which, when you read that, then you can recall the game, and that is a reservoir of experience and knowledge that you can call upon. And actually, when you set the spreadsheet up, as I did, it doesn't actually take that much, to do it. So that's just a very interesting way of doing it. But what I'd be fascinated about is, I wonder if anybody else has done exactly what I've done at my sort of community level, if you like, not into the national leagues, and whether there's a comparison. Because when I gave the figure about, off the top of my head, it was something like 850 yellow cards in 1,000 games. That sounds an awful lot, but it's still less than one a game. I think it was 21 red cards, which is roughly one every 50 games. It'd be good to know if there is a comparison with somebody else at my sort of levels between 6 and 9, 10, that sort of a, and see if I have sent more people off. I probably haven't, but
Well, there you go. That's the plea from us to, if anyone's watching or listening that have done something similar the same as Stephen. Yeah, I remember that Manchester meeting that we touched on earlier, that where you went through the Stephen Snoddy 1,000 game quiz, and there was some wild answers, is what I'll say, to some questions, like how many drop goals. It's like, 300. Do you think there's a drop goal? What, like one in every 3 games? I don't think so. But there's some really good insight there, and I think message to take from that, from a young YMO or people, it's probably just draw on more knowledge. I think use everything you can, and that's not necessarily going and yes, we've got a new learning development program in place, and yes, we're going to have some really good experienced referees within the society you can go to, but it's also how you can do it yourself. That's self-learning, and that's a piece where you've said keep a record, because you never know what sort of situations you think, oh no, I've had that before. It was in this game in 16 months ago, and that's what happened. Oh yeah, it comes to mind now. That's triggered a memory. So I think a really valuable piece of advice, and one that we all take. So listen, we'll end it there. But thank you so much for your time today, and obviously I wish you well for the rest of the season. And yeah, I think here's to 2000, eh?
Thanks, Henry. It's been an absolute pleasure. Cheers.
Stephen, speak to you later.